the odds of getting hit by lightning is 1 in 12,000. But for blind and deaf 62-year-old Ebony Robinson, those odds rose to 100%. Robinson wandering around outside in the field near his house, apparently looking for his chicken, swinging around his aluminum cane, and then taking shelter under the only tree when it began to rain was evidently too tempting for the lightning, which struck him to the ground. For 20 minutes, he lay unconscious, before waking up and stumbling back to his house, going to bed for a very well-deserved nap. Getting struck by lightning can tire you out quite a bit, you know. But when he woke up in the evening, he discovered he could see and hear once again. He was later examined by his doctor, who confirmed he had regained both his sight and his hearing, and probably survived the blast due to the rubber-soled shoes he had been wearing. Did you know you're more likely to get struck by an asteroid than win the lottery? But that didn't stop Joan Ginder. Over the course of her life, she won the lottery an astonishing 4 times, baffling scientists everywhere. And it wasn't just measly $20 or $50 wins, either. Each time, she won multi-million-dollar payouts. It all started when she first won $5.4 million, only to win $2 million more a decade later. 2 years later, she won a cool $3 million, followed by a staggering $10 million in 2008. During the 12th century, Nichiren was a prominent Japanese monk who significantly influenced the Japanese adaptation of Buddhism. However, his life was one of controversy and turmoil. He was sentenced to death by beheading, and the authorities felt his writings were subversive and would undermine their power if it was allowed to spread. However, with the literal stroke of good luck, Nichiren managed to escape his doom when the executioner was struck and killed by lightning when he raised his sword to kill Nichiren. Nichiren was later released due to the strange circumstances, though he was still exiled and would later live the rest of his life out in ill old age. He amassed a following and became a prominent religious figure in the country, showing success can come even in the face of perceived doom with a little bit of fate to lend a hand. Oysters are a beloved fine dining food, highly sought after in restaurants and by cooks at home for their flavor, texture, and sometimes even price. They're thought by some to be an aphrodisiac, and Terry Priest is more than in love with them, now that she found a pearl in one. With the simple act of getting a few 49-pence oysters from Tesco, much like most other customers do, Terry Priest managed to beat the 1,000,000-to-1 odds to find one of the pale treasures inside. She's about to move to Spain, and her colleagues at the homeless shelter she worked at made the pearl into a ring worth £500 as a going-away present, to always serve as a little reminder of her great luck. In 1995, Swedish woman Lena Paulsen set aside her wedding ring to do some Christmas baking. But when she went to return it to its rightful place on her finger, she discovered it was gone. After years of searching, she and her husband came to the conclusion that the ring was lost forever. That is, until 2012, nearly 16 years later, when Lena found something waiting for her in her garden. While pulling up carrots, Paulsen was shocked to find her long-lost ring around one of the carrots, an event so amazing it caused her to let out a scream that her daughter could hear all the way inside the house. Though the family has been gardening for years, there had been no sign of the ring. Apparently, this was the first time they'd planted carrots by simply throwing out the seeds at random across the garden, instead of in rows like they'd done before. The chance that one of the seeds had landed inside the ring is like winning some sort of mini bottle ring toss at the carnival. But Lena couldn't care less about the astronomical odds of how she got back her ring. She's just glad to have it back at all. Called the luckiest unluckiest man in the world, Croatian Frane Slick has cheated death, not once, not twice, but an amazing 7 times. His first brush with death was in 1962 while traveling in a train in January. The train flipped off the tracks and fell into a freezing river. Bystanders pulled him to shore and safety, with only a broken arm and hypothermia, while 17 other passengers drowned. Then, only a year later in 1963, during his first and last plane ride, the plane lost altitude and plummeted to the earth. Frayne was blown out of a malfunctioning plane door and somehow managed to land on a haystack, unharmed, while the plane crashed, killing 19 people. 3 years after that, in 1966, a bus he was riding in skid off the road into a river, drowning 4 of the passengers. Slid, however, swam safely to the shore and only sustained a few cuts and bruises. 2 years later, in what was arguably one of his weirdest reasons for almost dying, while trying to teach his son how to hold a gun, he hadn't realized the safety was off and ended up shooting himself in the testicles. He lived, though his testicles did not. Then, in 1970 and 1973, he got into accidents where the car ended up catching fire. Aside from a few singed hairs, he managed to get out of both predicaments absolutely unharmed, again. But his dance with death wasn't over yet. Later, in 1995, he was hit by a bus in Zagreb but only suffered minor injuries, and a year later, he managed to avoid a head-on collision with a United Nations truck on a mountain road by swerving into a guardrail. The guardrail broke under the force of the car hitting it, and Frayne, not wearing a seatbelt, was ejected out of the car when the door flew open. He watched as the car fell 300 feet into the ravine below. And to top his luck off, in 2003, 2 days after he turned 73, Frayne Slick won $1.1 million from the Croatian National Lottery. What a birthday present!